notification just went up, baby. And when it goes up, it only means one thing, man. It simply means that we are live. Woo, yes. What is going on YouTube? Woo. Man, was that a barn burner or was that a barn burner? Woo. My man John Prosser dropping some serious heat on the internet tonight. Video titled video titled Tim Cook is better for Apple than Steve Jobs. Now, you know, when you put a title out like that, all hell is going to break loose. And I'm pretty sure he knew. But with a video that inflammatory and that triggering, I had no choice but to put down a VypDrive tonight. So we're about to get into it and talk about John Prosser's video because there's a lot to talk about in that video. So sit back, relax, enjoy this VypDrive because honestly, I have no idea where this podcast is going to go. Let me get all comfy. Let me get comfy real quick, and then we can begin. Birdman hands rubbing together, baby. It's going to be lit. Whew. So, on this very special edition of VypDrive, my good friend and buddy, host of Front Page Tech, John Prosser, just dropped an absolute bombshell of a video on his Front Page Tech YouTube channel. Video titled, Tim Cook is better for Apple than Steve Jobs. Being the captain of Team Apple that I am, we got to talk about it, people. VypDrive, episode 37, starts now. What's up, people? This your boy Viper, the man about tech, captain of Team Apple, baby. And welcome to a special edition of VypDrive. This is the podcast about tech, hosted by the man about tech. And quite honestly, I don't know if there are going to be guests or not tonight on the podcast. Invitations are open to anybody that wants to come in and talk to me about this particular topic in video. But right now, we're going to roll with your boy Viper. So as I alluded to in my introduction, my good friend and host of Front Page Tech, John Prosser, just put out a video titled Tim Cook is better for Apple than Steve Jobs. And basically, I can sum up the entire video in one word. I know, right? 12-minute video, deep dive. I can sum up the entire video in one word, people. One word. Compromise. Woo! I know, right? I know. That is the summation of the entire video. So, Viper, when you say John's video was all about compromise, what do you mean? Well, let's get into it. I don't know how many of you all out there read Steve Jobs' autobiography written by Walter Isaacson. But in that autobiography of Steve Jobs, he talked about how he lived in his own reality distortion field, right? Basically, to Steve Jobs, the world was whatever existed within his mind. He didn't really entertain too many outside influences on his thought process. It was basically Steve Jobs' way or the highway, as many early employees of Apple could tell you. He used to scream at people, chew people out, fire people at will. Steve Jobs was like almost a dictator in his time at Apple. We know him as the great visionary in tech history, but make no mistake, in his early days as Apple CEO, the man was a damn near a tyrant, dictator, whatever you want to call it. People probably hated working for Steve Jobs. But what happened was eventually Apple forced Steve Jobs out, and then they had other people running the company. Now, I don't know the whole history of Apple, but in 1997, Steve Jobs was invited to come back to Apple as CEO because Apple was damn near close to bankruptcy. So because they were on the brink of death and they were close to bankruptcy, Steve Jobs was invited to come back and run Apple, and he did. When Steve Jobs came back to Apple, he wanted to simplify things. And in order to do that, he wanted to cut down the product SKU. There were too many products in the pipeline. There were too many things Apple would try to do at once. He felt like Apple was stretched too thin. He wanted to simplify the product pipeline for Apple, and that's what he did. Simplified the Mac line, simplified different things like that, and ultimately came up with new ideas for Apple to move the company forward. Obviously, the most revolutionary product of Apple back in those days was the original iPod, which practically started Apple on its upward trend and brought them to the company that we see today. But back in 2001 was the introduction of the iPod, which practically changed the music industry and the world of tech as we know it forever. Now, as my good buddy John Rettinger said in his video today, or I think he did it yesterday, John Rettinger recently did a video titled If Apple Went Bankrupt or If the iPhone Didn't Exist. And in Rettinger's video, he talked about how there were MP3 players before the iPod, but the iPod did things a little differently. The iPod was able to like blend music and internet experience and things like that together to give you that seamless music experience on the go, thereby saving a drowning music industry and completely changing the way that we listen to music. So that was Steve Jobs. Great visionary, not much of a business guy, but that's why he surrounded himself with business people. You know, back when him and Woz were doing his thing, like Steve Jobs was more like, well, Steve Jobs was kind of a business guy, but wasn't the best, you know. But we had the iPod, and then obviously 6 years later was the introduction of the iPhone, which completely changed technology forever. The issue is back in those days, back in the early 2000s and things like that, Apple was the game in town. There wasn't much competition. You have BlackBerry, which was practically fledgling out. They were dying. HTC, I don't know if the HTC was a thing back then, but HTC was going to come up later on. You had Nokia, Palm Pre, I mean, there are a bunch of different companies doing things, but the right was picking for Apple. It was Apple's time to come up and blow the technology world away, and that's exactly what the iPhone did. Steve Jobs called it an internet communicator, a phone, and a music player. He successfully combined all three aspects into one device, and that was the birth of the iPhone. So again, when the iPhone first came out, there wasn't many other, when the iPhone first came out, it wasn't the first smartphone, but it was able to successfully blend those three concepts into one device in a way that the consumer, the mass public had never seen done before. It was so easy. It was so seamless. It was just amazing. It was something like the world had never seen. As Tim R is highlighting in my chat, Steve Jobs was a marketing guy, but not a business guy, which is correct. Steve Jobs was a visionary. He knew how to market things to the mass public, but he was not a businessman per se. So the iPhone was introduced back in 2007. We're in 2019 now. The iPhone, even 12 years later, is still the dominant phone on the market. But life is not what it was back in 2007. There is so much competition in the smartphone game today that Apple had no choice but to transition and change the way they do business. Unfortunately, in 2011, we lost Steve Jobs. He passed away. But before he passed away, he named Tim Cook his successor. Now, before Tim Cook became CEO of Apple, he was the chief operating officer, basically handled all the logistics of Apple with iPhones and shipping and just product logistics, things like that. Tim Cook was the logistics man. He was more of a businessman than Steve Jobs. So if we look at it now, there are a lot of Apple purists who will tell you that Tim Cook is bad for business, that Tim Cook have made lesser quality Apple products than Steve Jobs did, and some of that might be true. But at the same time, Tim Cook has a better understanding of the market than Steve Jobs ever could have had right now. And this is what John Prosser was highlighting in his video tonight. It's not that Steve Jobs wasn't capable or wasn't smart. It's just that in today's climate, with the way competition is and the way the market is moving out, Tim Cook is better equipped to lead Apple into this new realm, this new area of business than Steve Jobs would have been. Steve Jobs was a product first guy. We need to hone and fine tune every aspect of a product to make it the ideal Apple customer experience. And nothing is wrong with that. But in that thought process, you limit yourself to what you can really do. You limit yourself to what the market actually needs. As John Prosser highlights time and time again, the market right now does not need innovation. The market needs compromise. Now, this is kind of funny coming from me because last year, I'm the same guy who argued with John that the iPhone XS Max would outsell the iPhone XR. And oh my God, I was so wrong. It's pathetic. But John understands the market. He understands it better than I do. And he's absolutely right. He was right then and he's right now. The market does not need innovation. The market needs compromise, especially considering the amount of competition in the market. Samsung is out there. LG is out there. Google is out there. Huawei is out there. Oppo, Xiaomi, everybody is out there trying to get their piece of the smartphone pie. Apple cannot craft the world to what they want it to be anymore. That's what Steve Jobs was good at. Steve Jobs was a master at designing and crafting the world into what he thought it should be, what he thought the consumer needed. The brilliant thing about Steve Jobs is that he presented products before we ever knew that we needed them. But right now, in today's world, that's not what Apple needs. That's not what the market needs. There are so many products out there in the pipeline that it's hard to really innovate. And the market is not really asking for innovation right now. The market wants to be able to afford these products. The market, as John Prosser keeps saying, needs compromise. So then we go into the aspect of why Steve Jobs couldn't lead Apple as it is today. Well, Steve Jobs was stubborn, too stubborn. As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, he lived in his own reality distortion field. It was Steve Jobs' way or the highway. And while that might have worked in the early 2000s, in 2019, that ish would not work. You have to be able to adapt to the market. You have to be able to figure out what the market needs and adapt because there's too much competition to be doing it your way or the highway. John Prosser said in this video tonight that Steve Jobs was so stubborn that he was too stubborn to fight his own cancer. And it eventually killed him. Now, as harsh as that might sound, it's the truth. It is absolutely true. Steve Jobs did not want to fight his own cancer. He was too stubborn to fight his own cancer. And John Prosser surmised that in that logic that eventually would have killed Apple had Steve Jobs still been running the company today. Now, I don't know if that much is true, but I mean, if the man let himself die because he was too stubborn to fight his own cancer, I don't think it's too far beyond the pale to assume that he would have let Apple go down the tube because of his own stubbornness and his living in his own reality distortion field. Not too far off the pale. Again, Tim Cook may not be the product visionary that Steve Jobs is, but Tim Cook has a better understanding of the market. Tim Cook is willing to compromise. The iPhone XR was a compromise for the market last year. Now, some people argue that the price was a little too high, but it was still, $250 less than the flagship iPhones of last year. And the XR went on to become the best-selling iPhone of last year. And this year with the iPhone 11, Tim Cook went down by $50 in price. And once again, the iPhone 11 will probably be the best-selling smartphone of this year because Tim Cook understands the market. He understands the competition that Apple is facing. He understands that there needs to be compromise. The other thing that John Prosser alluded to in his video tonight that Tim Cook has a amazing understanding of is that the iPhone isn't what it used to be. We all know that iPhone sales are on the decline year over year. People are keeping their phones longer. Phones are being made better. There's not many reasons for people to upgrade to iPhones. I think John Prosser made a video a few weeks ago highlighting the two reasons why people would absolutely get rid of their phones today: frustration and convenience. Phones are made so well today that you're not getting rid of your phone unless you're frustrated with it or unless it's convenient to upgrade to the newest phone. Now, I'm not talking about the hardcore techies that are watching this podcast right now. You guys are hardcore. This doesn't really apply to you. You are not the average consumer. You are not the market. The market is the average consumer that doesn't care if a new phone comes out every year. They're not getting rid of their current phone unless they're frustrated or if getting a new one is convenient. And John Prosser is absolutely right about that. I have people at my job right now that are still rocking iPhone 6s and 7s. And I'm like, I make fun of them. I'm like, what are you doing with that old iPhone? And they tell me, it ain't broke. It's still working. This is what people tell me. This is what the average consumer tells me in real life. They tell me that unless their phone breaks, they're not getting a new one. So John Prosser is absolutely right. Unless you're frustrated or it's easy to get a new phone, you're not getting rid of your current phone. You're not doing it. And this is what is contributing to declining iPhone sales year over year. And Tim Cook, being the astute businessman that he is, understands this, which is why you are seeing a gradual transition of Apple from a hardware company to a software/services company. And actually, Tim Cook understood this a long time ago, years ago. 2014 was the unveiling of Apple Pay. Now, from a non-techie perspective, Apple Pay is an easy way for you to pay with your phone, right? But did you know that Apple makes 15 cents on the dollar for every Apple Pay transaction? Now, that might seem like a small number to you, but how many people out there own iPhones that have Apple Pay enabled that are using Apple Pay every day? And there are countries in the world that are more developed than the United States and the Americas. So companies have been using mobile payments for a lot longer than the U.S. has. But the U.S. is starting to catch up with mobile payments. And Apple Pay is starting to become accepted in more locations. So Apple is going to make that much more money hand over foot because Apple Pay is starting to become the norm and not the exception. But Apple makes 15 cents on a dollar for every Apple Pay transaction. Tim Cook is not an idiot. He understands that iPhone sales are declining. He understands that Apple needs to find different revenue streams. iCloud storage. You want to know why Apple makes a 64 gigabyte iPhone? Because they want you to sign up for iCloud storage. So if you sign up for 50 gigabytes of iCloud, you pay 99 cents a month. If you sign up for 200 gigabytes of iCloud, you pay $3 a month. And if you sign up for 2 terabytes of iCloud storage, you're paying $10 a month. Apple are no fool. Tim Cook is not a fool. I told you all, he is the former chief operations officer of Apple before he became CEO. He's not an idiot. He knows how to make money. He knows how to extend Apple's shelf life. If Apple were still all about iPhones today, they would be right back where they were when they needed to invite Steve Jobs to come back into the company. They will be on the brink of bankruptcy because hardware is not the game no more. The game is software. And Tim Cook understands this. This is why we had a dedicated Apple services event back in March of this year. So on top of Apple Pay, on top of iCloud support, you got Apple Music, which is $10 a month or more if you have a family plan. You got Apple TV Plus coming at $5 a month. You got Apple Arcade coming at $5 a month. You got the Apple Card, which is the most brilliant, elaborate trap into an ecosystem I've ever seen in my life. Are you kidding me right now? If Apple Card isn't the epitome of Apple brilliance, I don't know what is. You cannot use Apple Card without an iPhone, which means you have to be in the ecosystem to use Apple Card. And Tim Cook is taking advantage of the fact that he knows that Apple is seen as a luxury brand, as a status symbol, if you will, and he is using that fact to trap people in the Apple ecosystem, making Apple more money. Think about the rewards that you get using Apple Card. You get 3% on all purchases made towards Apple products, whether that be at an Apple store, a physical Apple store, or Apple online, or I think just Apple products in general. If you use an Apple Card to purchase any Apple product, you get 3% cash back. Now, I don't know how good your math is, but I just told you all that you get cash back. The highest amount of cash back that you get on Apple Card, you get it by spending money on Apple products. So while you think you're getting cash back and that's all good and well, where does that money go? Where is it going, you all? Back to Tim Cook. Hello. If that's not brilliant, I don't know what is. 2% cash back if you use Apple Pay via the Apple Card. 2% cash back if you use Apple Pay. We're not going to talk about the 1% because that's just using the physical card. That doesn't really matter. 2% cash back on all Apple Pay purchases made via Apple Card. And what did I just tell you all about Apple Pay? Apple makes 15 cents on a dollar for every Apple Pay transaction. So yeah, you're getting 2% cash back, but every time you use Apple Pay, that is money in Apple pocket. Hell, I mean, at this point, they might be breaking even between the Apple Pay transaction fees and that cash back that they're giving you back. Hell, they might be breaking even. So they might not even be losing money on that front. Brilliant. Absolute brilliant. 3% cash back on all purchases of Apple products. 2% cash back on all Apple Pay purchases. All of that money, regardless if you're getting some or not, is going back into Tim Cook's pocket, in Apple pockets, because Tim Cook understands what Steve Jobs probably couldn't comprehend today. The iPhone is no longer the end. The iPhone today is a means to an end. It is no longer the end. It's a means to an end. Let me explain that for the people way in the back, baby. The iPhone is not the end anymore. It's not the objective of Apple. The iPhone is a vehicle now. It is a means to an end. Holy Lord. Do I need to repeat it again? The iPhone is the vehicle that Apple is using to lure you and trap you into the Apple ecosystem. The iPhone is the hub. It's the hub for Apple Music, the hub for Apple Pay, the hub for iCloud, the hub for Apple Arcade, the hub for Apple TV Plus. All that crap is all centered around iPhone. So it doesn't matter how much Apple sells iPhone for. The main objective of Tim Cook today is to get the iPhone in as many hands as possible, because Tim Cook understands the market needs compromise. And in order to meet the market and in order to maximize his dollars, he wants iPhone in as many users' hands as possible so they can sign up for those Apple services, which ultimately puts the money, whatever money they lose back on iPhone, the money goes back in their pockets with services, baby. Services revenue. Again, I am dropping, yeah, like Cousin Joyce, I'm dropping fire. But I'm just telling you how it is. Like, I was kind of ignorant to this stuff until John Prosper put me on game last year. And then things started happening in front of my face, and it's hard for me to ignore what's happening in front of my face. I am not a business person. I don't have the understanding of the market. But what I do understand is physics, because I have a degree in physics, which is the science of nature. I understand things that are happening in nature, things that are happening in front of my face. And when I see Apple iPhone sales on a decline, and I see Apple introducing an entry-level iPhone and then dropping the price of that entry-level iPhone the next year, and understanding how competition is filling into the space, I understand what Apple is trying to do, especially when you have all these Apple services that are coming up. So again, the iPhone is no longer the destination. The iPhone is just a part of the journey. It is an end. It is a means to an end. It is not the destination. It is a part of the journey. That's pretty much what it is right now. Apple's objective with iPhone is just to get it in as many hands as possible so we can all sign up for Apple TV Plus, Apple Arcade, iCloud, Apple Music, or however many other services they have. Apple wants to make money off of services because they know iPhone sales are on the decline and they know they have to make money other ways. Tim Cook understands this. He probably understood it a long ass time ago. We're just catching up now. But Tim Cook understood this years ago. We're now just catching up. And this is why Steve Jobs handpicked Tim Cook to lead Apple into this next century or whatever next phase of the company's life cycle, because Tim Cook understands business and he understands how to extend the shelf life of Apple. Steve Jobs, as great of a man as he was, as great of a visionary as he was not equipped to handle the market as it currently is set today. There's too much competition. He was too stubborn. Apple needed a new leader. He found it in Tim Cook. And as John Prosser concluded in his video tonight, in 2019, Tim Cook is better for Apple than Steve Jobs. I absolutely 110% agree with John Prosser. I tried to explain this to a friend of mine, my man LeBaron Burton. I tried to explain it to him a few weeks ago on a live stream, but he was letting his emotion get in the way. He was so emotional about the decline in Apple products. But the problem with his argument is that even if there's like a few chinks in the Apple product armor, the ecosystem is so strong that the Apple ecosystem shields the inconsistencies that you find in Apple products. It is so easy to switch between Apple devices to get whatever it is you want to get done, that a chink in an Apple product armor doesn't make a difference when the ecosystem is backing it up. The ecosystem is so strong that it holds the product up. It doesn't matter if the MacBook has faulty keys on the keyboard. People can use an iPad. It doesn't matter if the iPhone touchscreen isn't responsive. They could go to an iPad or a MacBook. It does not matter. One faulty device is not going to shut down the entire system. It doesn't work that way. Apple has built the system so gangsterly that it doesn't matter. The ecosystem, as I keep telling you all year, the ecosystem is undefeated. And it's the reason why Apple is still ahead of the game, even with declining iPhone sales. Apple is still ahead in the game because nobody has figured out how to craft an ecosystem like Apple. Their ecosystem is so ridiculous that other companies are trying to scramble to catch up, and they have not caught up yet. And until they find a way to catch up, Apple will still be number one in profit. Because it doesn't matter if your product has more features or is technologically better than an iPhone. It doesn't matter. Your product does not fit into an ecosystem that is undefeated like an iPhone does. I have in my hand right now, I know you audio only people can't see this, but in my hand, I have the Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus. Now, I have an iPhone 11 Pro Max on pre-order. And even on paper right now, the Note 10 is running laps around the iPhone 11 Pro Max. But guess which one you will find me using more? You guessed it, the iPhone 11 Pro Max. Because the iPhone has a stronger support system. It just, for me, it does more in the end, and it works better for my workflow. Now, I know that's a personal opinion, but as John Prosser alluded to again in this video, sales numbers don't lie. iPhones are the top-selling smartphone every year. So I'm not alone in my sentiments. I am not alone in my personal preference. A lot of people, most people, choose iPhone over Android as far as top-selling phone year over year. Yeah, of course, Android have more market share because there's more Android devices out there. So, of course, they have more market share. But if we're talking about top-selling phones individually, iPhone. And it's iPhone for a reason. And now Tim Cook is understanding how to cut into that Android market share. And you're going to see some cutting going on real quick with this iPhone 11. So that is what's going on. And as Tech Ranch is highlighted in the live audience, he says Apple is still a status symbol. I think that's what's doing it for Apple too. Absolutely. You are absolutely right. Apple is still seen, even to this day, even 12 years after the debut of the iPhone. Apple today is still seen as a status symbol. The iPhone is still seen as a luxury brand. You are absolutely right about that. And that definitely helps drive sales. So we have my good friend Roberto Blake in the chat. He said Windows could have been a contender if they only had been a bit quicker to figure out what they did with the service design. They could have had ecosystem, and most people have Windows computers. Roberto's not kidding, because 90% of the computers in the world run on Windows. So Microsoft definitely missed an opportunity with Windows. But it's not that they're doing badly. I mean, they're doing great, but they're not Apple. Even Microsoft, as great as they are not Apple. And that, my friends, is what is going on with John Prosser's video tonight. That is why John Prosser is absolutely correct when he says Tim Cook is better to lead Apple right now than Steve Jobs, because Tim Cook understands the one thing that I highlighted at the very beginning of this podcast: compromise. Thank you guys for listening to the podcast tonight. If you want to support the podcast, if you appreciate the content that I am putting out here on the interweb, please consider donating by buying me a coffee. The link is in the description. If you are listening on audio only, there will be a link in the show notes in order for you to donate. As I tell you guys every time, it is not required, but it does help me greatly if you choose to donate. But I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, all 47 of you. I think I got up to 50, which is kind of unheard of for these podcasts by myself, but we got up to 50 people tonight. Thank you guys for listening. This will be available on audio only in a day or two. So that is it. I agree with John Prosser 100%. Tim Cook is much better fit to lead Apple in today's market than Steve Jobs is. And anybody who argues differently is arguing on emotion and emotion alone, because that's the only argument that you could be making, on sheer emotion, because the facts don't lie. As I've said time and time again this year, the facts don't care about your opinions. The facts don't care about your brand loyalty. The facts don't care about your feelings. The facts are just as they are. The facts are the facts. The facts are that Apple has made more money under Tim Cook than they could have ever dreamed of under Steve Jobs. The facts are that Apple makes more profit than any other company in the entire world because of Tim Cook. The facts are that because of Tim Cook's choices, Apple is at the pinnacle of the tech space right now. All of that because of the choices and decisions that Tim Cook has made since taking over CEO position from Steve Jobs. Tim Cook led Apple to where they are today, and that is all I got to say about that. Until the next time, people, this your boy Viper, the man about tech, captain of Team Apple, baby. You know where to find me, so come back for more.